ISO FileMaker Magazine, the professional's resource for FileMaker know-how. Hey there, this is Matt Petrowski. Welcome back to yet another tutorial video where we are going to learn more about FileMaker Pro. In fact, if you are using JSON at all in your FileMaker solution, this is very important. But not only that, FileMaker might have a memory bug. Let's take a look at what I'm talking about. All right, so thank you for joining me here on my desktop. And what we have here behind me is it's a tweet that I made in June, let's see, it is right there, June 15th of 2022. Now, this video is going to serve as a little bit of a public service announcement, a fix, and then also some information about just some better ways that you can work with JSON, especially if you're working with APIs, and it becomes super important. Now, as we take a look at this tweet, I'll explain what it is basically saying. Actually, let's zoom in right there. So this top box is saying using FileMaker's while function, which is right here. Now notice this is a great way to test the performance or the speed of a particular function. Notice up at the very first thing that I have right there, get current time UTC milliseconds, and then I have it after. So by sandwiching that one function between those two get UTC, you're able to actually do a millisecond difference between the two. And we're going to see that in the code that's provided where a bug is more or less proven in FileMaker, the public service part of this announcement. But I was mentioning, notice the while function. The while function here is attempting to generate just a simple range of numbers from 1 to 100,000. And you can see that the dialog right here that comes up, it says FileMaker doesn't even have enough memory in order to finish this operation. Now, if you've been working with FileMaker for a while and you notice that sometimes things just get really slow and they bog down, there's a couple of reasons why, and we'll talk about that. It's primarily based on the data viewer, but it's also based on how and what FileMaker is doing in terms of its data. Now, what I was seeing here, or what the follow-on dialogue was for this, was a post about what had recently been released in, as I highlight it right there, get the cursor off to the side of it, you can see that bbox_JQ. Now, I had been exposed to JQ. It is a command line tool, and we'll take a look at it here in this video, that it processes JSON like a beast, an incredible beast. It is so lightning fast compared to FileMaker. But not only that, FileMaker is already pretty slow, but it's got a hindrance of this bug, which we're going to be taking a look at, confirming here in this video, and then seeing how you can actually address it if you're going to stick with native FileMaker functions. Now, while I respect and love the bbox plugin, it's free, as well as the base elements plugin. I use both of them. I really am not impressed and don't like the implementation. Now, unfortunately, because of how bbox has implemented, it's just what it is. In other words, this value that we see right here underneath the cursor, that 0, it's this obscure thing that bbox has where you have to pass in something about the plugin and how the plugin is going to work, and you really just can't, it's sort of, it's like mystical. You don't know whether you're getting it right or wrong, and it really has nothing to do with the function that bbox is passing in, other than the fact that bbox supports many different languages, AppleScript, Python, etc. And I believe it supports them directly as opposed to making calls to the system, which is what you do in base elements. If you want to access Python, you just call into the system. You can do the same thing in bbox, but I think bbox embeds the technologies such as Python directly and probably just calls AppleScript, etc. Regardless, it's these first few parameters that are more or less unnecessary with regards to calling to some type of functionality. Now, while I love the Beeswax team, Vince Monano, great friend, I just don't like this particular implementation. So, long story short, you can see right here what I'm doing is this is actually generating where FileMaker couldn't generate 100,000. This is actually generating 1 million values, and it's doing it within 395 milliseconds. In other words, what we're doing is we're taking data from within FileMaker, putting it into a plugin space in memory, letting it do its thing, and then just handing a result back. Now that happens super fast, and we are very interested in that, especially when it comes to JSON. So that brings me to the bug. This is the public service announcement that you need to know. I don't want you to be concerned. If you're from Claris, obviously, this is something that needs to be fixed. If we have technology outside of your own technology that is happening lightning fast using command line tools or libraries which are being compiled into plugins, Claris needs to address this. In all honesty, it's really just not acceptable. So let's take a look at this public service part of this video. All right, so here is your public service announcement and things that you simply need to be aware of. Now, it isn't confirmed whether Claris says what I'm about to say is a bug or not. Maybe it's intentional, but for me as a developer and you as a developer, this is something that is very important. Well, at least it is to me, and it should be to you as well. It both deals with memory and it deals with speed. So those two issues, we always love doing things quicker, but when it comes to memory, if we think about a server implementation, and that server has multiple FileMaker files, and those multiple FileMaker files are doing things that FileMaker does natively that consumes and eats up a bunch of memory, well, if you only have a finite resource and that resource gets exhausted, then it puts stress on your server, and you're either upgrading the hardware or you're finding a way to fix it. So what we have here is we have a post that was made it has nothing to do with what I just talked about, other than the testing method in terms of what Alex uses for testing. But on June 18th, or at least that's when this article was edited, of 2022, and that's 3 months prior to me shooting this video. So if you're watching this and Claris has addressed the issue, then we're good. But in here, this is a pretty shocking title. It was brought to my attention by a friend of mine. Catastrophic memory allocation issue. Now, whether or not you consider this catastrophic, that's up to you, but it is absolutely definitely there. I'm going to show you here on screen how it's actually happening and verify that what Alex is saying is actually true. You can read the article. If the article disappears for some reason, I don't know why it would, there is the URL that you can have up here up on the top. And here is the rest of the URL. We'll go through that. It's got the long string for obviously Google SEO in terms of making that reliable. Don't know if that's needed, but hopefully it's not been taken down because it really is a good piece of information about what's going on. So long story short, here is the gist of what's going on. When you assign a variable in a function, let function, don't know if it's script step specific. If you're assigning what's known as a substring or one of FileMaker's text functions, more or less, if you scroll through the article, you'll see which ones are affected and which ones are not. Alex has done a great job of really sussing this out. If we do this, what's happening is here, you can see that if there is 5 megabytes of text that is inbound, this variable gets a full 5 megabytes of memory space, even though out of that 5 megabytes of space, only 2 characters are read. So that's an important thing, because if you're doing this within a loop or within a while function, every time that variable is declared, you may be adding to the memory, I think of it as memory pressure. That's just because that's what we see in the activity monitor in the Macintosh. We'll see that. And you can see right here that his following example is for this variable, you reference that variable, it again allocates 5 megabytes. So we're at a total of 10 megabytes just for the fact that you want 2 characters out of that 5 megabytes and then following on just 1 character. So for a total of 3 characters, you have 10 megabytes of memory that's now been allocated. That's pretty significant. Now, for some bizarre reason, I don't know why Alex played with this or did this. He tried this little trick where he says, well, what happens if I don't, setting to the variable, set the actual value, but instead set just a prefix of nothing concatenated, then call the actual text function referencing the variable that had declared the 5 megabytes. Lo and behold, memory did not increase. So in this, He says he's got a how to replicate right here, and we're going to see this on screen as I go through this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all of this text and show you how you would actually replicate this. Now, the result that he indicates down here of milliseconds is going to be different on all the different machines, but we're going to see as I boot up FileMaker here, and I'm going to hide that. The way that we are going to test this is we are going to use the way that we can see memory. We are going to switch to the activity monitor, which is right there. Now, when the activity monitor comes up, you can see that I've got my little cores, however many cores your machine has. No big deal. I don't need that on screen. We're not interested in that. What we are interested in is we're interested in seeing how much memory is used when we do things in FileMaker. Now, this is advanced stuff, but you can see that I'm on the memory tab within the activity monitor, and this is where I was talking about memory pressure and how I think of the memory that's used. Now, each application gets its own memory. We can see that I am already filtering based on FileMaker, and I'm going to launch FileMaker right now. As FileMaker comes up, I've got an outbound firewire or firewall on this for outbound traffic, just to make sure any FileMaker file I open, I can see what's going in or out. The way that we are going to test this is we are not going to open a file. I need to bring the data viewer, which is very large on screen. We have a watch variable. We are going to switch over here. We're going to select on the FileMaker process, which I've got right there, and then I'm going to click on this little eye, and it says inspect the selected process. Now, what's going to come up is a little dialog right here. It's got the process ID right there. We can see it's process ID 6338. And we've got a current memory of 483 megabytes. Now, I have not opened any files. I am just in raw FileMaker. And we're going to switch back to FileMaker. We want to be able to see that on screen as well. We'll switch back to FileMaker. We will hide this dialog. We've got our data viewer right here. We have a watch variable. Now, in this watch area, we do not want to have we don't want anything that does anything with regards to memory. We can see that the memory has already jumped from the fact that there was a variable there. In other words, FileMaker had to evaluate the fact that this was happening. Now, if we open this, what we're interested in doing is we need to establish a sort of a baseline of what's going on. My baseline on this particular machine, for example, is right around in between 530 or 500 and it's gone between 530 and 560 megabytes, depending what's going on. And this bumps up and down depending on FileMaker's writing and reading to the prefs file and doing other little things it needs to do. Maybe it's pinging out on the network. Who knows what they're doing in terms of memory. But what we're interested in is what happens when we are testing FileMaker's memory using all of those functions. So importantly, we do not want this option turned on. We want to uncheck the automatically evaluate because we want to be able to get the code into FileMaker without FileMaker actually evaluating that. So as I paste what I had copied, which happened to be the code I took directly from that post, what we've got, as I hide this, is everything that is the actual test. Now, what we can see is as we scroll through this, let's push this off to the side and see if we can get this even more. See if we can get this so that we can see things a little bit better. There it goes right there. We can see this. I like being able to see things on screen. So we can see what's going on. He's got a start of a test. He's going to log the result. He's got then another start of a test. And each one of these, you can see that he's got a fix. Now, this is the fix that we were already talking about, where he's simply prepending. Note in the article that it mentions it doesn't work in reverse. In other words, you can't put the ampersand double quotes on the back end of the text function. It only works for some reason if it's in the front of the function. Now, in order to verify that the memory boost does actually happen, you can see that we're still at my baseline of around 538. As soon as I click evaluate, what we're going to see is because of these tests up at the top, where we are using the left function without that prepended set of quotes, we are simply replicating what he says. Now, note in this code, there is a JSON set element. The JSON functions are also affected. We're going to see that in this video, but watch this. Evaluate. We just went from 530 to 685 megabytes. That's my expression. Yeah, that's a huge increase for the fact that we simply just ran a calculation here in FileMaker without a file being open. And we can see right here that the results that Alex has provided it's really nice. It tells you exactly how many milliseconds. So the memory issue it's proven. It actually, again, I'm really interested to find out if Claris says, nope, this is not a bug. We actually want to take that much memory for every variable declaration where you are simply just referencing another variable, and we want to just accumulatively add all of that memory. Whoosh. We're going to see where and how FileMaker's performance is just so much worse than many other technologies that you can use. Unfortunately, you just have to use a plugin. So let's take a look at the impacts that it has with regards to if you're doing things with APIs and a lot of JSON, because that's where it became really interesting and important for me. All right, so we've got this memory issue. We know that FileMaker is creating much more or allocating much more memory than it needs to for the simple operations that we have. And the article itself posts on all of the different functions that are actually impacted. One of the most important ones is get value. In fact, in the article, they talk about there's this routine that within JSON, it was found that FileMaker's JSON functions were highly inefficient, and being able to just grab a certain number of elements or using JSON get element across a very large array, let's say a couple megabytes, which you can easily get from a lot of modern day APIs, is just horribly inefficient. This is why I actually personally will be using a plugin in order to do this, and more than likely doing it server side. Don't worry, I'll be showing you about that in this video. It's basically the JQ functionality embedded within an upcoming release of the Base Elements plugin. But let's address our FileMaker issue first, and that is the fact that for some reason this oddball fix of prepending just an empty set of quotes and concatenating that to the affected text functions is the fix. I mean, and we want to verify, is this something that is worth doing, and would I ever want to do that? Well, the answer is probably no. So whenever we're doing this memory thing, we need to always start with a new baseline. So I quit FileMaker, we'll launch FileMaker back up again. Go ahead, I'll let all of my connections come through. We've got a new process right here. I will inspect that. We'll look at my baseline. Currently it's 401. I haven't done anything in FileMaker. We'll switch over to FileMaker. I'll close this dialog. I'm going to open a file, which is fix, or the fix that I'm going to propose here. Let's make sure it opens right there. We're going to check on our memory. I've opened a file. Again, my baseline memory has not adjusted that much. We're going to switch over to the file. So what is the fix? Well, let's switch over to Visual Studio Code, where I've got a number of different tests. I don't know why it's graying out here, but I'll just simply copy the tests because we want to do them in FileMaker. So we'll hide that. We'll come over here. We will open up our data viewer, switch to our watch. We have no other variables being declared. Check our memory. It's still at 4. We want to actually offset that. We are going to switch back into FileMaker. Let's move the file so that we can see. We'll go into our variable. Our automatically evaluate is turned off. We are going to take that code. Now let's talk about the code and what it's actually doing, because it's always interesting and good to know things about how developers are doing things. You can see that we've moved up to what I consider my baseline. That is, as I stated earlier, in between 530 and 560. That's without anything open. Well, this file is open, but the file's doing nothing. It has no startup. All it has is custom functions. Those custom functions are not being evaluated. So when we look at this, this is a test that Alex set up. There's basically creating an empty and basically an array of 1,000 items. Remember, in JavaScript or JSON, everything starts at 0, so 999 means that we're going to have 1,000 of them. He is initializing that array to have a value of a key value pair of X and 1. He is then using the substitute function to replace all of the nulls that are created, because remember, he's setting into the 999th instance of this array this object. That means everything preceding 999 from 0 to 998 is null. Well, he's substituting that null with an actual object, which is right there. So he's basically creating a really large object, and he's setting into that a FileMaker object that is super large. So get system locale elements returns a JSON object with everything about the system, and it's pretty big. And he's doing it for 1,000 items. So that right there is our array. We've got our array. He's going to do a count on that. What is the quantity of the array? He's using a value count, and he's using JSON list keys on the array. What is the size of the array? He's using the length function. You should know this. If you want to know how many bytes a container has, you use the length function. If you want to know how many characters a string has, you use the length function. Length, for the most part, tells you the length of anything. So here is the fix. He's doing the first operation first by doing the prepending, because he wants to see how fast that is. Then after that, he's got what was called an old trick of using list values. He's using it's straight right here without any prefixing. We can see right here, here's the prefix, and here's the prefix on the get value. And then finally, he's saying rely on cache. So in other words, this initial variable all the way up here of array, once it's been initialized and it's in memory, then FileMaker can reference it over again, or what I'm assuming he's calling the cache. Now, when we evaluate this, we are going to see, do you see my little, yeah, you see it right there. It's on screen. And it just executed right there. All right, so we did the memory bump. We went from the 530 all the way up to 611 megabytes, so we added a lot. But we can see right here on my particular machine the results. So this one was with the fix. This one is the normal, and then this one is the cache. So in other words, what this is saying right here is that the normal use of JSON list keys or JSON list values or JSON get element or get value or left function or right function or any of these is operating this much greater than this. These two tests were the same, with the only difference being that they were prepended with the double quotes and the concatenation. Now, if you do the math on these, I'm not going to bring up a calculator. I forget, but the performance difference is roughly, I think it may be 10%. I read in the article. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but let's say even 5%. If the whole of your solution times the number of solutions you have on a FileMaker server times all that thing is 5% cumulatively, that's a lot. And especially if it's 10% reliably. Now, the plugin, it doesn't even compare. When we see what the plugin does, it's just going to be insane. So the question came to, if we go up here, this fix. Are you going to implement in your FileMaker solutions using or prepending this, sprinkling it throughout your whole solution? And my answer was no. I'm not going to do that. That doesn't make sense. I'd like to have FileMaker or have Claris fix the functions, fix the memory, and fix the speed within FileMaker, because why not? It'll take some engineering resources and time, but make the platform good. So, what is my proposed solution for the fix, and how did I test it? Well, let's go ahead and click cancel here. We'll quit FileMaker. Everything will close down. I don't know. We don't really need to do this. I'll close this because that's terminated. We will go double click my fix file and take a look at what I propose as the fix. Open up the outbound firewall. Go over here. Open up my memory. We can see there's my baseline 400. Here is my proposed fix, and here's how I tested it. So we go into custom functions, and we look at the custom functions. All I am suggesting is that if you are using and you want to have this fix until FileMaker fixes it, I am shooting this in a copy of FileMaker 19.5. And in the article, Alex points out that this has been around since FileMaker 13. That means that this increase in memory for these variable assignments on all of these text functions has been there the whole time. And here is the fix. For each of the functions that you want to use that the fix does apply, you simply create a wrapper function around it. And I tested this. It actually does work. We can see that by going over to the data viewer, going to our watch variable, opening up the watch variable. I do not have automatically evaluate turned on. We switch over to Visual Studio Code. I go to the test. Here's where I had, this is basically a shorter version of the test where I only had just the one single test. So we won't run the standard one. We could, but I'm not going to. We'll just copy this one. I know why. I moved these from where their location was. Fortunately, they're in memory. We will hide that, come over here, and we will paste in the code. So we can see that in this, I'm only running one of the three tests that Alex was running, which was the fix, then the normal, then the cached result. So here is a reference to my custom functions where I am going to, actually, we've got to do it. I've just got to do it just so that we can see the difference. Let's go to this one, copy it. We'll go over here, paste it in. So this is going to run a normal test with the normal JSON list values and with the normal get value. And this is currently the suggested workaround to dealing with a large array of items where you want to process all of those, presuming in the array are objects. You basically pull them out of the array, put them into a FileMaker list, and then you're just going to cycle through them using getValue. But remember, getValue suffers from that performance hit. Well, let's click Evaluate, and we will get our little thing right there. So we are at 1.2 megabytes. That's what the array contains of 1,000 items, and you get 3,600 milliseconds using those regular functions. Well, let's just switch over here and just use the fix itself. Now, I would need to quit FileMaker, which go ahead, we'll remember that number, 3630. We'll go ahead, cancel that, quit FileMaker, hide that, close that terminated, come over here, open the fix. 3630 is what we're remembering. Allow any connection, open our data viewer, go over to the memory, show the memory, 445, go back to Visual Studio Code, go to my test 3 where we've got the fix, hide that, come back into FileMaker, open my watch variable, finally get in here, and then automatically evaluate is turned off, paste my code. We are now referencing those wrapper functions. We are using the wrap, which is simply using the exact same FileMaker function with the prepended double set of quotes with the ampersand, concatenating that in. We have relaunched FileMaker. Our memory has been reset. Our speed was 3630 milliseconds. And we are going to run this one. And we are going to get 2185. So our difference there is 2185. We'll go ahead and take the 2185. We'll copy it. We'll come in here and we'll do the 3630 minus the 2185. Evaluate that. That is a difference of 1,400 milliseconds, which as far as I'm aware is 1 second. That's 1 second of time of a difference of simply wrapping FileMaker's functions using the exact same function with the exact same parameters, but simply prepending this. Am I going to be doing this in my FileMaker solutions? I am. The one thing I don't know is if there's a cost to however many times you're calling the custom function, but I'm presuming it is negligible in relation to the fact that you're gaining a whole second of time. All right. Beyond that, if I'm working with a large amount of JSON in my FileMaker solution, the question is, am I using FileMaker's JSON functions? And the answer is, unfortunately, no, I am not. FileMaker's JSON functions are convenient because they are embedded in FileMaker and you don't have to have anything installed. But my personal development with FileMaker considers that external technologies are valuable enough to at least run them server-side. So when I'm running a FileMaker solution that's dealing with an API that generates a very large amount of text, we're talking anything over 500K, where FileMaker itself is going to bog down and start to really feel the pressure. And I want to do things fast. I use a plugin on the server side. If I can get a client to use the plugin, sure, and I'm doing a lot of things client side, I will do that, but from a convenience standpoint, it's really not that big of a deal to have the base elements plugin, which is free, and I highly suggest supporting them, to install that on the server side. Now, what I'm showing you is currently, as of the recording of this video, if you're watching it much later after the date that shows on this video, a beta version of a function that has been embedded into base elements. Now, as I stated very early on, at the very beginning, Bbox, great plugin. They have JQ installed. If you're already using Bbox, there is no reason to switch from Bbox. Personally, I install base elements by default. Base Elements has decided to implement the use of JQ, and it is mind-numbingly fast. So we know that this array that's being generated is 1.2 megabytes of 1,000 items with objects that are pretty large. We can see that my memory pressure is currently, or my real memory size on the application is 499 or 500 megabytes. I've opened FileMaker brand new, fresh. Now, that while loop that was being used within FileMaker was cycling through using a get value on 1,000 items, but referencing an object that was super large. Then presumably you would want to use, after you've used get value, you would then want to pull something specifically out of it using a JSON get element, which adds an additional item on each object. So essentially you're taking one large JSON, you're breaking it down into multiple little pieces just so you can work on those pieces, and then specifically pulling out the pieces that you need, which is very common with APIs. If you go the plugin route, especially with JQ, you don't need to do that. It is so fast, it just looks at the whole array and pulls out exactly what you want and does it super fast. So this function right here, be JSON use JQ. JQ is a library from a command line function. I'll show you how to install it on your Mac if you're interested, where this is basically saying I want you to pull out of that array just simply all of the objects, or look at the whole of the array. So when I click evaluate, it's going to be instantaneously almost, relative to 3630 milliseconds. So 3 seconds versus a quarter of a second. There's no question for me. Memory, nothing much changed. I'm still at baseline in terms of that array was still generated, the 1.2 megabytes. It was handed into the plugin. The plugin used JQ, processed that, and pushed it back into FileMaker, did it in lightning fast speed relative to what FileMaker is doing. And it's on the server, and I can perform this server side and then just have it show up in the client with minimal data transfer between the two. That's my solution. That to me is what FileMaker should be doing, and it's my hope that this video will either spark the fire underneath and say, hey, this is something we need to fix and address. Compliments to Alex and pointing out the find. But if they can't afford to do that, this makes more sense to me to use this, especially if I'm doing anything with an API. And this will be out. This plugin's going to be, or this functionality, the JQ functionality, is going to be going beta in the next release of the Base Elements plugin. And it's just how I'm going to prefer to do things if I'm dealing anything with an API. Now, also within FileMaker, what I'm going to be doing is I'm using JSON more and more to do things like generating sidebar menus or storing and collecting a lot of settings for all of the different users. As long as you're looking at the length function, because I don't want you to be scared here. I don't want you to not use FileMaker's functions because you're scared that you're paying a penalty now of a more than double in terms of speed and memory, and switch everything to the plugin. That's not what I'm saying here. Just look at the length of your text. Use the length function. If your length is exceeding 500K, or if you're noticing a speed slowdown that's really painful enough to get you to make the switch or to implement the fix, then do it. For my development, my future development going forward, I don't have a problem using custom functions as wrappers and using the fix currently, because it actually gives me a little bit of extra power in terms of I can actually switch that wrapper function to using a plugin or using FileMaker's internal functions and just mirror whatever the functionality is that FileMaker uses. So that's my suggestion. I'm going to, for heavy API use and really heavy JSON, I will be using the Base Elements plugin. For normal everyday FileMaker use, I'm going to implement fix wrapper functions because they get the benefit, and they also prevent me from having to sprinkle in a little set of quotes and the ampersand across my whole FileMaker solution, which just doesn't make any sense. But what we're going to do for the remainder of this video, if you're interested, is we're going to take a little bit of a look at JQ, an introduction, and see how you can start to get used to this within your FileMaker solution if you should choose to use it. All right, so let's get into a little bit of geeky stuff. What is JQ? How do you learn about it? How would you use it within FileMaker? And why would you want to use it? Well, number one, the best thing I can tell you is if you're looking for the ultimate in speed, FileMaker can't even compare. FileMaker can't compare with native JavaScript. I would, if I was Claris, if I was the CEO, if I was Brad running Claris, I would be implementing the V8 engine from Google, which they could implement directly into FileMaker, giving all developers full access to native JavaScript, wrap some functions around that so that you could get JavaScript results in and out. They don't really need to do, if you have access to JavaScript, you wouldn't necessarily need JQ, but currently we will have JQ within both the Bbox plugin and in Base Elements. So how do you get, number one, if you download the Bbox plugin or the plugin from Base Elements, you have access to JQ and you don't need to do what I'm going to show you what to do right now, but I love providing you with all of the possible information. On my Macintosh, I've installed Homebrew. If I type in brew, I'm going to get a list of all the different commands of how I can use brew. Now, in all of computing, there are these things called package managers. Package managers simply allow you to go get something from the web, and it installs it and puts it into a common or a known location. Doesn't mean that it has to go in that location. You can always change it to a different location. On the Macintosh, there are two of them. I forget which one I used to use before, but Homebrew is the more modern one that replaced what I was using. So as I clear this, we can actually see that if I want to install JQ so that I could play with it on the command line, I would simply just type in brew install JQ. Now you're going to have to install Homebrew. And I think if you go to homebrew.io, look up, just do a Google search for Homebrew install, Homebrew Mac, and you'll be able to find that. But if I install this, this will go, it will build the tool. I'll need to allow my connections out to GitHub and let it go get the formula so that it can actually run that. And hopefully it installs relatively quickly. Oh, it's going to tell, it had to go do its brew update and actually find out what was updated and what was not. But we can see right here that we actually got an install. It says pouring JQ 1.6. This is the most recent version. We can always look at that by calling the command line and asking for the version. This is the same version that is installed within the Base Elements plugin and also within Bbox. It is roughly 4 years old. It hasn't been changed. It's been around that long. I can't believe I didn't even know about it. I had seen it on a few Stack Overflow what am I talking about? Comments, but I had never really used it myself. So I have, I've created a sample.json, which is the exact code or the exact thing that was being generated from Alex, his particular testing functions. I am going to cd, or what's known as change directory, into this directory by simply just dragging this file. Now, I don't want to change directory exactly to the file, so I'm going to take off the file name, and it's going to take me into that actual folder. So now that I'm here, I'm going to type clear so I can go up to the top of my thing, and we can see how I would use JQ. JQ is available on the command line, which I can always see whether a command is available or not by typing the which command and then typing the command itself. So which JQ is going to tell me where JQ is installed. And we can see quite clearly it's installed at user local bin, which is the place that it should go to. So if I want to pass something to JQ, and the reason that I'm showing you this is it's super important, if you have not worked on the command line, that you understand how pipes work. Just like in plumbing, when you have water and you want water to flow from one place to another, you put a pipe. Now, if you have two pipes and you connect them together with, like, I think of it as a coupler, then you're basically saying, I want this to continue to flow through here. So in all of Unix, there are these things called pipes. So there is this command called cat. And while I'm here, I have that document called sample.json. Now, if I cat this or catalog this, we can see that what prints, as I zoom out here, is just everything that's in that file. Now, that's a JSON file, which is the output from what was created in the watch variable in FileMaker. So we'll clear this and go back up to the top. What happens is JQ at its base is simply just going to pretty print all of our code. So if I do a cat of my sample.json, and if I pipe that with the literal pipe character, and I always like to have a space in between them, it makes it a little bit easier, to JQ. So what I'm saying is I want you to take the output of this, and I want you to pipe it into this right here, JQ. Now what we can see is when we do that, what we get is we get a nice pretty print of all of this information. Now, in JQ, what JQ will take is a list of filters. Remember that I said in FileMaker, what they're doing, or what a lot of developers are doing as a fix, is they're taking a very large chunk of JSON and then breaking it down into smaller chunks that they can actually chew on and process. You don't have to do that with JQ. With JQ, it's so memory efficient and fast, you just give it the whole thing and give it exactly what you want. But you have to learn about these filters. You have to learn about how things are actually processed. Now, fortunately, as I clear things here, in all of computing, there are these things known as slash typically represents root. In XML and XPath, double slash means any or all descendants, or the period means the root of what you want. In FileMaker's functions, FileMaker's JSON get element, if you specify as the key index you want, you have some JSON like this, and if you want to get the root element, you can specify either the period or you can just specify a simple quote. That period means the root. And even here in our operating system, if I did an LSLA here on this, ls-LHA, that's basically list, and those additional flags say I want you to show invisibles, we can see right here that this dot represents the root of this folder. These double dots represents the parent or one folder up. So the same thing applies in a lot of other technologies. So we are going to cycle back up to that same command of JQ. And if to JQ we were to pass a filter of the dot, we get everything that we got before. So we'll clear this again, and we'll do this. So if we say, on the root of what we have, we now have an array. This is going to say, okay, I'm just now going to give you just all of the objects. This is roughly the same thing as what they were doing by breaking all the large objects into smaller little chunks and processing them one object at a time using the getValue function within FileMaker. But here, passing the whole JSON, let's say, for example, that we simply just wanted something out of all of this. As I scroll up, let's say, for example, now all of these values are all going to be the same. But let's say I want out of the locale ID. So I'm simply going to copy this. I mean, once I see the JSON, all I have to know is that I can copy it directly. So I will copy this value, we'll clear here, and we'll go up. I am able to, just like we have pipes within the operating system, we have pipes available within JQ. So JQ allows us to pipe. Now remember, everything within quotes here is going to be, what we are looking for here is going to be a dot. And then did that not take that locale ID? Let me zoom out here and see if I've got it on my clipboard. Nope, I copied the pipe for some reason instead of piping it. Was it locale ID, I believe? Nope, that was all null. That's all right. Let's just pass our function again straight to JSON and see what it is that we want to get. It was something that I probably... Locale ID. You have to know that you're grabbing off of what you want. Let's go right here. I need to be in Z. So that's the issue right there. Out of each object, I have to get .z, then I can get the locale ID, so that's why it was null. So let's go back in up at the top here. We'll type in a clear, and let's go back to our command right there, and let's pipe that. So we are getting, out of that array, we're getting every object. In every object, we want Z. Let's see if it gives us a result. It does give us a result. So off of Z, let's see if we can get the locale ID. So we'll type in clear here, clear that. I'm using the up arrow to go back to my previous command. So off of Z, there is a thing called locale ID. Let's see if we get something. Nope. Again, I'm probably not referencing the right object. So we'll type clear here. And what I'm going to do is we are going to do a little trick here. I'm going to say I want to get locale Z. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw in another pipe. I'm piping to another command right now, and it's going to be the command called less. Actually, let me clear that. Let's see if that works. Oh, I need to quit out of that and then come back to this. And let's do head. There we go. That's just going to, head is just going to give me a little bit. Actually, you know, I should show you what we're talking about. There are a couple of commands that you can give you that are what are known as pagers. The old one is called more. The newer version is called less. There are also commands called head, where you want to get the top of a file, and there's one called tail, where you want to get the bottom of a file. I didn't want this to turn into a Linux, Unix, command line seminar, but there we are. If I want to see what Z is returning, and I only want just the first part, let's say, in this case, I'm going to say date. Let's say I want the date now. So let's clear this, because I'm getting off of Z, I'm getting each of those dates. So let's take this pipe off, the OS pipe. Now we're within the quotes, so now we want, let's say, date. There, you can see that it's giving us all of those individual date parts. So now we can, out of all of the date parts, we could get whatever we want. I'm going to do a clear again. If I want to see the head, I'm now going to pipe that to head and say, okay, let's say I want the first day of week for some reason. So here I would be able to copy this. I would be able to say, okay, I want to take that OS pipe off, and I want just the first day of the week. And I run that. Is that not? Oh, that's DMQ. God, pay attention, Matt, right there. DMQ first day of week. So we'll just stick that in there in between and see if we get a result. Dot. Nope, we've got the dot DMQ dot first day of week. Unexpected literal. Oh, fine. Clear. Zoom out. Clear. There we go. Let's see. Great. I put it after the command right there. And for some reason, quarters. I don't know. You can see more or less what we're getting right here by simply just putting in exactly what we want. Now let's put in the name list. Name list. Boom. Right there. And then let's say you want the first item of the name list. So let's go ahead, hit that. We'll type in clear, zoom in so that we can see on screen what's going on. So Again, JQ, super fast. It allows you to drill down into your object without breaking them down and essentially get exactly what you want. You just have to follow the JSON down. That's the whole point of this. I don't know why it's extending out as long as it is. But now if I want, let's say, for example, just want the first item of that array, I can simply reference it with the array. And look at that, I get all of my first quarters. If that was my goal in FileMaker, then I would be able to do that. So let's see it in FileMaker. What I'm going to do is I'm simply going to copy this filter right here that we have. This is the filter that we created to pass to JQ to get at our JSON. We've done it here on the command line, but again, the command line tool is not required. You don't have to install this. It's already baked into the plugin. So as we open FileMaker back up, and we're in our watch variable, and we go in and we need to go over to Visual Studio. We need to copy this. We're going to go into our variable. We're going to paste everything that we have there. I'm going to go back to the command line. We're going to copy my filter there, go back to FileMaker, and finally say, we've got an array that's being created that's 1.2 megabytes. We know that. We have, out of that 1.2 megabytes, we are not using FileMaker's function. We are going to use the JQ function, and this is my filter right here. I want to get the first value off of the name list of the quarters within the DMQ, within the date area of the Z that's being generated by the system locale elements. So after all of that, you'll have to trust me, I don't have the activity viewer showing. There is no memory that is basically used. I evaluate, it's almost instantaneous. 113 milliseconds, a fraction of a second. And if I wanted to see the results right here, I would simply say the results are being set into this variable called X. We will simply add it to our result here. We'll click evaluate again, and boom, there it is. I mean, it is just so screaming fast. So hopefully throughout this video, you've been able to get not only a good sense for the fact that FileMaker has some issues. It's got some memory issues. When I first saw that, I was like, ooh, wow, this makes a lot of sense. And in closing, what I'm going to suggest to you is if you are doing heavy JSON development, if you're working on a solution, you're doing a lot of JSON inside and you're doing a lot of API work, be extra special aware that your data viewer is going to slow things down. For everything that you're testing in here and for every watch variable that you're creating, if you've got multiple watch variables that are doing multiple JSON, JSON get elements, JSON list keys, JSON values, clear those out and make sure that you only have them when you are actually testing what you're testing. If you want to test with JQ and you want to do it with super large data, you can do it outside in a data view or in a terminal, but it's not required. You can test directly within FileMaker. So just keep your data viewer light. Make sure that you're not loading and passing really large sets of data between scripts, passing them as a script parameter. That does have a performance impact. If you can do things on disk sometimes faster. You can definitely do them faster on server side. And that's going to be my suggestion. Use perform script on server. Put the base elements plugin server side. Use JQ over there. Let's hope that Claris fixes the issue with both the memory and the speed. And don't be afraid of using FileMaker's functions. And if you are using them and you are concerned about the speed, then create those wrapper functions that I suggested, and you should be able to get at least a little bit of a performance increase by 10%, maybe more over the cumulative amount of use within your multiple FileMaker solutions. So as always, I hope this video has provided you with more information, taught you more about FileMaker, and I'd like to wish you much luck, and until next time, happy FileMaking.
We hope you've enjoyed this video tutorial, and we'd like to say thank you for your subscription and your support. If you're not already a subscriber, head on over to www.filemakermagazine.com/subscribe for more information about the benefits of joining.